a third grade math lesson. The standard for this lesson is going to be that the standard is interpret products of whole numbers, and the example is interpret that 5 times 7 as the total number of objects of 5 groups of 7 objects. The math practice standards for this are make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, reason abstractly and quantitatively, construct viable arguments, and critique the reasoning of others. Our lesson objectives are going to include that students will be able to describe that a total number of objects can be expressed as a number of groups of numbers of those objects. Another one is that students will be able to write word stories, model with math, and critique the work of others as related to multiplication facts. So motivation for this is that it's going to involve a little bit of creativity. They're going to get to draw their models, and they're going to be using poster paper to create their word stories and then write their models on there to solve their problem. And then these creations are going to be shared with the class, so you can encourage them to make it look nice. They can use colors if they have time for it. They can use a marker to write their problem down. So this creative aspect is kind of going to motivate most of them. They're going to want to be able to share. As long as it looks pretty, they'll be able to share, and most students will be motivated to do this by that. You can use other ways of motivation as well, but I think the creativity aspect and being able to come up with their own word problem is a good one, because they're not just solving a problem that's given to them. They get to come up with their own, so that makes it fun for them. Here's application. So students will be working with a partner to create their own word story to represent the understanding of numbers represented by blank times blank equals blank. So they're going to be assigned randomly the numbers. You could have them pick if you think that won't take that long. Another way is to randomly assign them. You can also have the partners come up, roll a dice each, makes it easy. They get those numbers. Then they're going to come up with their story. Once they've come up with their story, they're going to figure out 2 to 3 ways to model it. They are going to have to solve the problem, so they can use their story to solve it, or they could solve it beforehand, depending on how they want to do it, but they do need to have 2 to 3 models, good models, solving their problem. They're given poster paper to write their finished product and draw their models, and then they're going to be expected to share with the class. So make sure you let them know this beforehand so they know what's coming and that they want to make it look good so the rest of the class can understand what they were thinking. And then while they're working, the teacher's going to go around asking questions to promote thinking, guiding models, and answering questions that the students might have, and then just making sure that students are staying on task and that they're representing the numbers correctly and using models correctly. So here's the different types of modeling. You will have already gone over some of these types with them, because this isn't going to be the first time they've done multiplication. They're just figuring out how to put that into word problems and use grouping to solve problems. So some of those modeling styles are going to involve picture groups or rectangle arrays, a repeated addition on a number line. They can come up with their own if it makes sense and get it teacher approved. You can give these examples to them, you can talk about more, you can answer questions. There's going to be a lot of different ways that they're going to be using modeling, because they're each going to have to come up with 2 to 3. So like one of those is going to be grouping. You draw out the group, so here's 3 groups of 5 objects. It becomes a repeated addition, you get 15. That answers the problem 3 times 15. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for them to use modeling. Strategies for computation, here's where you use your manipulatives. So you can have manipulatives ready for them to practice if they need to use them to figure out the answer to their number problem before they even create their story. So you can have marbles ready with cups so they can separate those into groups. You can use Legos I've noticed that some people just use the little dots on top of the Legos and you count those, or you can use them as individual pieces. Another thing I saw was using Play-Doh, so they can make their own little balls with the Play-Doh and then group those into however many groups with however many units they need. You need to make sure if you're using Play-Doh that students are staying on task and not just playing with it. So this is going to be at your discretion with what type of class you have, if you think they can handle it, or if you think that your monitoring around the room is going to keep them on task enough, then I think the Play-Doh is great because they're responsible for making their own manipulatives, so it's kind of fun for them to do that as well. And you can have other ways, other manipulatives out at the ready for them to use. And then you can use these also when they're going around looking at other groups. You can have them have some manipulatives and practice that problem and see if they get the same answer or if it helps make sense of the reasoning of that group. So they can use this in their like showcase of their problem when other groups are looking at it to make sure that they understand each other. So for assessment, obviously they're going to be turning in this poster paper and you're going to be looking at them as they're creating them, when they share them, and then they're going to turn it into you. And then you can post those on the walls later, but you're going to be able to go over these, make sure their word problem makes sense, make sure their models make sense, make sure they did it in a manner that's able to be shared. So you're going to be able to look at these closely and see which students understand, which students got it, which students might need help, etc. While they're working, you're going to be monitoring and directly watching students so you can see that students who are struggling, students that aren't communicating well, this is a great chance to see who can communicate with another student. And then you're going to be able to look at their models. They can ask you questions. You can kind of guide them, ask them guiding questions. So you're going to be doing informal assessment throughout the whole project. And then they're also going to be expected to share with their peers. So you can provide them with prompts if you think that helps, or they can write something to their peers that they have read their word story and they agree with it, or something they didn't get, something they don't agree with, something they thought they could have done better. I think prompts is a good idea for this grade because they might not know exactly how to word things in a nice way. But that's just your discretion, whatever you think is best for your class. So when they're going around looking at other students, they're going to leave something that they have written for them to let them know what they thought about their word story. And then here's an exit ticket you can give them. So after they share, um, they're going to turn in their word posters and then they're going to fill this exit ticket out. This could be done later if you don't have the time for it. This could be a 2-lesson type of thing. You know, they figure out their story and then they create it the next lesson and then you share them when they're done. Depends on your timing, up to you. But here's the end of the lesson when you're all the way done. You give this to students and they're gonna do 3 things. The first thing is they're gonna critique their own story. So their group, their partner, each of them are going to do it. Something we could have done better is, and then they're going to either answer that sentence stem or create their own full, complete sentence answering what they thought they could have done better. Number 2, they're going to say something that they learned today. Remind students that it needs to be something pertaining to the lesson, not, oh, I learned that I like to use markers or I like to write on poster paper. It needs to be with the math, and they can use their model ideas, they can use their manipulatives, whatever. I learned how to make a word story. That is something they're reflecting on. That's fine. Um, and then the last thing is going to be what you want to know more about. So something I want to learn more about is, and they're going to tell you what they want to know more about. So students that might want to understand different types of modeling better, they can write that there. And this is going to be a good way to gauge where your students are at, what they want to know more of, what students want to move on, etc. So exit tickets are always good to see kind of where your students are at after a lesson. And this is references. It's mostly just for the photos I used. Yeah, that's my lesson. Thank you.